Hey there, everyone. How you doing? So just real quick, still trying to figure out this external mic for sound. Um, Still trying to figure it out. But anyways, I'm going to talk about something I saw from Alan Greenspan today. He talked about the wealth effect, which is something I first heard about, I don't know, probably 15, 20 years ago when he was the Fed chair. And it's probably the best articulation of what I have been trying to communicate heading into 2020. Uh, you should look it up. I think it's on CNBC. He did a couple of interviews today. But basically, the deal is when people feel rich, when their assets are doing well, they spend. Now, let's be clear about what assets he's referring to. He is generally referring to the stock market. He was being interviewed on CNBC. But I think the logic still holds for us as real estate investors. And this really goes back to my thesis of get ready now if you're not, because I think 2020 could be a great time to get in the game. So the story goes, if you are starting to feel less rich, meaning the stock market in his example is going down, earnings are weaker, and thus you feel more at risk, you are going to back away from spending. That means things like expensive cars that we've talked about at the Pebble Beach auction didn't go well. We just talked about this morning Starbucks indicating for the first time that growth may not be what they had forecast. Retailers left and right talking about it. Manufacturers talking about having to absorb tariff costs. There's lots of stuff going on. So if the average consumer, which is what I'm looking for because I want to understand what they're doing with their money, right, on their greed versus risk scale or fear scale. If you see a future where they're going to feel less wealthy, you can then take the next step and say they're going to stop or spend less. They're not going to upgrade their house. They're not going to make that first time purchase, which is going to strip away demand. Real estate, unlike other things, there are events that happen that people have to sell. And if listings are rising because more people have to sell and demand is falling, it could be a great time in 2020 to be an educated real estate investor because I see it coming, right? It's like a train. I can see the stock market between now and say the middle of next year having lots of ups and downs. I think the economy today is at full employment. I believe manufacturing and the consumer has trouble ahead. I can see the stock market being down 10 or 20%, right? Having when the recession is seen as real, people will pull back, they won't buy, impacts demand, hence a great time. The other thing that's going to happen, I think, next year is the Fed is going to fight this. The Fed's going to go back to zero on interest rates, or between 0 and 0.25%. That's going to help real estate investors because the biggest expense most of us have is mortgage payments. So if we can get once in a generation mortgages, it's going to be good for us. You layer on top of that real estate investors being better served by financial institutions because the owner occupant is not doing first time buys, they're not taking cash out like out of their house via refinances. We could get better loan packages, more efficient, less costly because we're going to be the only game in town. So I really believe in the wealth effect. I believe the wealth effect is really kind of what leads this is if people are feeling good, they're buying, and if they're not feeling good, they're not. And yes, that starts in the stock market because it's easy to hit that sell button. But as a real estate investor, I'm looking at, okay, if people are pulling money out of the stock market because they're nervous, that also means they're not signing that offer, they're not upgrading their house, right? They're just buckling down, which for me will strip demand. Demand means more supply. And then if we add on top of that the Fed giving us extremely low interest rates, you add on top of that banks coming back to real estate investors and offering us real investment loans instead of limiting us to 4 or 10 or whatever it happens to be. I think 2020 is going to be a great time to be a real estate investor. I've called it the golden age a couple of times. I really do think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have our pick of the litter, but you have to get educated. You have to learn your market. You have to learn your asset type, right? So you need to be ready for this. If you don't know how, I obviously talk about, how I help my students all the time. Look for a link below. I don't care how you do it. Learn your market, learn your asset type, be ready for what is coming, because I think 2020 is going to be a lot of fun. So I just want to thank Alan Greenspan. I think his talk today on CNBC was very interesting, and it really helped crystallize that the wealth effect is real. And if you play out the wealth effect, it has absolutely impact on real estate investing. All right, everybody, have fun. Take care.